are here today to talk about is the very, very important issue regarding the ongoing debt crisis in Greece. We're going to be focusing on Greece, but in truth, this issue goes beyond Greece. In many ways, Greece today resembles the United States of the 1930s in the midst of the worst depression, economic downturn in the history of our country. I want to begin by expressing my solidarity with the people of Greece, where 5 years of cruel and counterproductive austerity policies demanded by the European Central Bank, the European Commission, and the International Monetary Fund have left the people of Greece facing a full-blown humanitarian crisis. In my view, there is no more obvious example of the failure of austerity policies than what is going on in Greece. For more than 5 years, Greece has cut pensions. Greece has slashed its government workforce. Greece has made deep spending cuts that have eviscerated its social safety net. In other words, despite what we have been led to believe by many in the media, Greece has not gone on a shopping spree. It has not overfunded its government. Rather, it has imposed massive spending cuts that have caused devastating pain to some of its most vulnerable people. It has done this because its creditors, led by Germany, have insisted that austerity is the only way to dig Greece out of its debt. As a result, today, Greece has the highest levels of inequality and the worst unemployment rates in Europe. Instead of solving the problem, austerity, in my view, has made a bad situation much worse. But instead of working with the new government to find a rational path forward, the Troika demanded more austerity than ever. On July 5th, the people of Greece spoke once again in an overwhelming show of solidarity with their government. 61% of the people of Greece said no to more austerity for the poor, for the children, for the sick, and for the elderly. Yet, instead of working with the Greek government on a sensible plan that would allow Greece to improve its economy and pay back its debt, Germany and the Troika continue to push Greece to accept even greater austerity. The people of Greece are being told that their voices, which they cast in 2 elections, really do not matter, that their misery does not matter, that an entire generation of young people who are unemployed or underemployed does not matter, that the sick and the elderly do not matter, that democracy itself does not matter, and that, to my perspective, is unacceptable.
Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from downtown Brooklyn, USA, where we say Lou La Livre with super producer Matt Leck.
Lou La Livre.
Lou La Livre, Matt. Good evening. How are you? I hope you're dried off. Very, very brutally rainy one out here today as the video maven Vic Viana interrupts my flow by entering the studio. David Griscom is on the road. He's at a sea bass.
Yeah, posting pictures of meat.
Yeah, he's at some type of sea bass and communism forum. I initially was going to joke he was at the Kinsey Institute, but it would have been funny, but it would have been a less on-brand joke. He's actually close by the Madrigal region, as far as I understand. He'll be back next week, and all of your gem needs will be met. No worries. On this week's program, the great Ryan Grimm joins us in studio. He's here. You're good? You're all right, Ryan? That was a very strong reaction off mic. Ryan is here to explain to us why Donald Trump needs to be taken off of Twitter immediately. He has extremely strong feelings about this.
For more videos.
He's also the Washington editor for the Intercept. We're incredibly excited to have him on. We're talking about an illicit history of the modern Democratic Party. The debate last night, Bernie Sanders' mega week, and the state of the race. An election update in Argentina, a throwback where Cristina de Kirchner explained vulture capital. We're waiting on a decision in Brazil that might, in fact, free President Lula, even as the Bolsonaro government gets much more overt in their appeals to a return to military dictatorship. Erdogan is ethnically cleansing Kurds and cucking Trump. We have a letter that, if it was any other circumstance,
it's a beautiful letter.
Yeah, it would be hilarious. And we have more throwbacks from Trump that we're going to need to get to. This is the 32nd anniversary of the assassination of Thomas Sankara. We're going to talk about him. We did a deep dive with him with Milton Alamati and a whole bunch more on a very rich Wednesday TMBS. I'm exhausted, folks. I'm not going to lie to you, but I'm ready to go. And first, let's talk about what's happening in Ecuador and Haiti and place it inside the history of the World Bank and IMF, whose fingerprints are always all over these crises. Let's start with some footage. I don't think there's less sound to this one. This is from Haiti. This is from the People's Dispatch, which is a really good channel. I would subscribe to it. They have a little bit of a video primer explaining what's been happening in Haiti over the last real year, basically. And what you have in Haiti, going back, if you want to take it to the founding of the country, is an ongoing punishment from Western powers for freeing itself from slavery. Literally, Haiti was forced to pay off the French a debt for liberating itself from slavery. Let that sink in. Fast forward, after supporting multiple military dictatorships, which guided through World Bank and IMF structural adjustment plans, which we'll get to briefly, we'll get to in a moment. You saw a 2004 U.S.-backed coup against Jean-Bertrand Aristide, a whole complex that implicates U.S. corporations, the UN, peacekeeping forces, and many others that subjugate Haiti and continue to impose austerity. And there's multiple uprisings happening now against the entire political infrastructure, the corrupted local elites, as well as Western capital. In Ecuador, which we'll get to, have some footage of Ecuador as well. We'll actually play some footage from this report from the Real News Network. This will contextualize some of what just happened in Ecuador, where Lenin Moreno, who was the successor to pink-tide leftist president Rafael Correa, has gone on a hard far-right course. Let's play a minute of this report from the Real News Network.
Repression and a general upheaval in Ecuador, the government of President Moreno and the most important indigenous organizations agreed to engage in negotiations to discuss the cancellation of austerity measures that President Moreno had imposed about 2 weeks ago following the IMF prescriptions. The economic measures included a near doubling of fuel prices, about 23,000 layoffs in the public sector, and the deregulation of labor laws, following a neoliberal model. As soon as the measures were announced, protesters came walking and in caravans from different regions of Ecuador. They started to arrive at Quito on Saturday, October 5th, and continued arriving for over 11 days. They marched to demand the cancellation of the IMF decree that would directly affect the poorest. One of the main organizations behind the protest and the strike was CONAIE, the Confederation of Indigenous Nations of Ecuador.
Now, Moreno has backed down, but bear in mind that as soon as he assumed the presidency in 2017, even though he campaigned in the center-left, he's governed in a hard-right fashion, and he had a brutal response to the initial protests, and leftist leaders are still being arrested across the country, and Rafael Correa is still wanted in Ecuador on almost certainly trumped-up charges in the vein that put President Lula in jail. So, common to both of these case studies is the World Bank and IMF. The World Bank and IMF emerged from the Bretton Woods post-World War II system. One institution, the IMF, to try to control and regulate global currency exchange, and the World Bank, which was tasked with development and poverty reduction. What this has meant in practice is an imposition of very tightly regulated orthodox economic policies that have starved public resources across the globe and made environments in Latin America, Africa, Asia, and Eastern Europe friendly to Western capital. And I want to cite somebody that we did an illicit history with for patrons. There's a book called The Globalists by Quinn Slobodian, who's an economic historian. And he made a really important distinction here, which is that the rhetoric that is used by the advocates of laissez-faire and the people that run these institutions that regulate these global trade and global economic frameworks, they talk a lot about freedom of capital, deregulation, lessening bureaucratic burdens, by which they always mean cutting public resources and gutting government, right? And that somehow in contrast to that, there's freedom and fluidity in capital that is innate and liberating and prosperity creating. Well, we already see, and that's not the case. There's still significant structural poverty in the world. And in fact, even after a kind of relative overall decrease in the last several decades, mainly led by the enormous reversals in China, but also in some respects led by, as an example, the pink tide, which took 70 million people out of poverty in Latin America between 2000 and 2014 by not following these policy prescriptions. Some of these, World Bank and IMF, have self-assessed that their own policies don't necessarily work in terms of poverty reduction. But back to Slobodian, these policies are very rigid. They're very regimented. They're tightly regulated. They're just tightly written and regulated in a way that benefits Western capital. And as long as that is the case, you will have these uprisings. You will have this fundamental conflict that you see in Ecuador and Haiti over the last couple of weeks. And we have an obligation to extend our sense of global solidarity in a practical sense for how these institutions are governed and how we deal with them. We saw this in Greece. That's why we played the Bernie Sanders cold open. And of course, Bernie is the only one who has spoken in solidarity with the Ecuador and Haiti protests. And that isn't just a point scoring in a presidential campaign, although it is. It's an important fundamental point about where we're really coming from in terms of a global 1% versus a global 99%. Understanding that these systems are globally connected and need to be confronted globally, particularly in the center where so many of our institutions still benefit from these predator arrangements. Matt, what do you think?
Well, we sort of alluded to this with Andre Demise in the pre-show that we did today. But
everybody should read this book.
It's free online, so if you're getting this now, you can just download it. The Black Jacobins by C.L.R. James, the anti-Stalinist communist writer, Marxist writer.
Anti-Stalinist communist, yep, the independent Marxist. He was a Trotskyite, but graduated from them too.
He
got all of the major calls of the 20th century right.
Yep. So everybody should read Black Jacobins.
And check out the primer that I did on the TMBS channel on the Black Jacobins. Matt, do we have the new shout-out song, the one that we played last week?
Oh, yeah.
That was pretty fire.
I think it's this one.
Let's get to... No? Well, do you want to play the Alex Jones one?
Shout out. My brain is still in recovery mode. Shout out. My brain is still in recovery mode.
I'm going to have to ask Ryan if he knows.
Shout out. From taking in so many
oh, you're lucky.
Ideas.
And you're about to not be lucky.
From taking in so many high-level important ideas. The dial of ideas. I like talking about ideas, high-level. The exchange of ideas. Shout out. High level. Still in recovery mode. Looking forward to sharing more ideas.
How do you think the Blaze is going for him? I wonder, has he started on the Blaze yet?
Yeah, he has. He's all aboard the Blaze.
He's all aboard the Blaze Express. All right, let's go to the complete opposite of Dave Rubin for the shout out. This is the 32nd anniversary of the assassination of Thomas Sankara. We've talked about Thomas Sankara on this show, particularly with Milton Alamati, who's one of our mentors and guides, particularly on the African continent. Incredible journalist. Check him out at Black Star News. There's a video intro which you can look up on the YouTube channel, and then there's actually an unlocked illicit history that you can check out on iTunes. So Thomas Sankara took over Burkina Faso in 1983 on a platform of anti-colonialism and liberation. Let's play about a minute. I think you should start earlier in the clip. From an incredible documentary you can check out on YouTube called An Upright Man about Thomas Sankara. I'll play a minute of it, and then I'll talk a little bit about his accomplishments.
Notre pays produit suffisamment de quoi nous nourrir. Nous pouvons dépasser même notre production, malheureusement. Par manque d'organisation, nous sommes encore obligés de tendre la main pour demander des aides alimentaires. Ces aides alimentaires qui nous bloquent, qui nous inspirent, qui installent dans nos esprits cette habitude, ces réflexes de mendiant, d'assister.
Upper Volta, 1983. Thomas Sankara is brought to power by a coup supported by one of the poorest peoples on our planet. Behind a military uniform and a Marxist discourse, Africa discovers a young and dynamic leader, ready to put his innovative ideas at the service of his fellow citizens. Thomas Sankara gives a new name to his country, Burkina Faso, which means the land of upright men.
And in 4 years, he led extensive reforestation projects. He made significant strides in terms of gender equity, food self-sufficiency, and absolutely enraged the United States and France in particular by basically saying that if they were still going to kind of impose the same economic conditions on him and not support debt relief, which he was a major advocate of in the 80s, that he would prefer to go to the Soviet Union for some type of economic relationship. He was assassinated and removed in a French-backed coup that was undertaken by his second-in-command, who actually ended up running Burkina Faso till 2016, when he was ran out of power by young people who held signs and banners of Thomas Sankara as they marched in the streets. And I think the timing is fascinating, that he was somebody holding this kind of flame in the 1980s after the reversals, particularly like in the 60s, after the liberations of the 60s, then these reversals in the 70s. And by the time you get to the 80s, you know, you have the ascendancy of Thatcher and Reagan and so on. And then in this tiny country with very limited economic resources, this young, incredible leader came out of nowhere and held the flame in a pretty extraordinary way. So I would definitely recommend checking out a lot more about Thomas Sankara. All right. We should do the pitch. We should do the pitch, and then we're going to bring on Ryan told me that he thinks that Donald Trump being on Twitter is a crime. So I'm just... Yeah, somebody call the police. I was making fun of Kamala Harris, and he said, I will not go on air with you. Keep joking about that.
Is this 911? There's been a terms of service violation.
911, there's been a terms of service violation. I need to talk to your manager. This is Ryan Grimm from the Intercept. I'm totally joking. I think everybody who knows Ryan Grimm knows that I'm very much not being serious. Guys, we are well on our way to our first 3,000 patrons. I think we're at 2,869 as of showtime. You know the deal.
Nice.
But we don't want to stay there, Matt, even if it appeals to your puerile sense of humor. We want to get to, say, as an example, 3,069. 4,069. We'll just keep growing. So when you become a patron, you get the Sunday shows, you get the illicit histories of usually focusing on global politics, but also introductions to different ideas, thinkers, people, including a great one we did with Ryan Grimm as an example. And really, I mean, we basically covered the modern history of the progressive movement inside the Democratic Party, including with some fascinating detours. People like when Jerry Brown was cool, as an example. One of the moments that he chose to be cool. We might talk about that more later. Then you have the post games where we have an incredible amount of fun. Sometimes we take your calls. Sometimes we take your Discord questions. We play clips. You might, as an example, see a new character tonight, MLK Andrew Yang, which I've been thinking of a lot. What was it, Matt, that we were doing with that? I felt, because Andrew Yang is always like, we basically can't solve any problems, so just take $1,000. So it's just like racism is terrible, but we're never gonna solve Jim Crow, so get $1,000 and move. UBI. I love that.
That's how the Great Migration happened.
Right.
It was a UBI.
It was a UBI plan. Yeah, so things like that, which are fun. There's also a Discord community for 21 and above patrons. We give you the video illicit histories that we do at Vic Viana, who's going to be hanging out with us in the post game as well. The next one, the one that's already there for patrons, we give them to patrons first for about a month, and then we release them on YouTube because we want as many people to watch as possible. The latest one is on Jamaica, socialism, CIA destabilization, and how the cartel business replaced socialism in Jamaica from the 1970s to the 1980s. We have a bunch of other ones. They're awesome. I'm super amazed by the work that Vic does, and it's awesome to get to be a part of that. So go join up. Patreon.com/TMBS. Patreon.com/TMBS. Now, we are officially, I think actually well over halfway sold out for our live show in Philly, and we're still 5 weeks out. Do we have the link to that? So November 23rd, that's the week before Thanksgiving, at World Cafe in Philadelphia, we're doing a live show with Artesia Balthrop, who will be back next week. Great TMBS regular. Crystal Ball from The Hill, from Rising, friend of show, and also friend of show Emma Vigeland. This is our 4th live show. We killed it in Brooklyn. We had a Doors-like experience in LA.
Yeah, riding the snake.
That was intense. It was awesome. We love LA. But and then we had a very genteel evening in Chicago. And now we're ready to go to the city of brotherly love. And I will say, I mean, look, we've ended up packing every venue we've gone to. So thank you. And, you know, there's always like the promoting thing. And it is true. Like they always, everyone always spikes out of the gate, then it slows down, then it spikes again. This one is staying pretty steady. So I think this one might sell out the fastest. So I would go get your tickets quickly to see us at the World Cafe November 23rd in Philly. Click the bell so you can get the notifications for all the live streams. Spread the word. You can hit us with a super chat donation if you like. Patreon.com/TMBS. All right, folks. Yeah, we'll take a brief break, and then Ryan Grimm's going to join us in studio. Welcome back to the Michael Brooks Show. Great honor to welcome in studio Ryan Grimm, Washington Bureau Chief for The Intercept, author of We've Got People, which is a great, great book. Ryan, thanks for being here.
It's a great honor to be here.
It's awesome to have you. It's awesome to finally get you up to New York, a proper city.
This city.
I don't even care. I don't actually have all that like New York, like New York, man. It's the only place. I mean, I like it.
Right,
but,
and
you know, whatever.
Y'all are going to look like suckers when it's underwater and you have to live somewhere else.
I mean, isn't DC? I mean, I guess. I mean, I don't know.
My house is on a hill.
Your house is on a hill, yeah, but you're gonna like, I don't know, you get the type of tropical diseases that are gonna migrate to DC.
They'll get there
it's gonna
before
be
they
fine.
get here.
Yeah, we live in the hilly part of Brooklyn anyway.
Yeah, we do.
Oh,
we live in
you're
high
good,
elevation Brooklyn, so
yeah, never mind.
You're barking up the wrong tree, my friend. I mean, if you're listening to this and you live in Gowanus, you probably should really like. We're not gonna do anything about global warming.
No, we're on hills. We're good. We're on hills.
Yeah. Can we just start with just like pure Bernie bro celebrate? First of all, what are you? You like 50% Bernie bro, 30% Warren bro, 20% like Tulsi Stan? What's the breakdown?
Well, I'd say I'm 100% the Bernie coalition needs to win and like reshape the Democratic Party.
Right.
Because, you know, if the party continues drifting toward this high education, fine. High wealth, that's a problem. Like
right.
you can't have kind of a working class revolution with a party that is dominated by rich people.
Right.
So I'm for Bernie Sanders like recreating this party. But I have more faith in the possibility that Warren can bring a lot of low-income people into the party than a lot of other people do.
Right.
That like I think there are a lot of particularly low-income women who could identify with her like Oklahoma upbringing, and that she wants to bring into the party. Like I think she also wants to reshape the party. I think she wants to win the nomination first, and if the indivisible suburban crowd is going to like push her to the nomination, she'll take that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's an answer to the question or not.
Yeah, no, I'm actually no, because I think you're one of the only people that is. I mean, I think that there's people, you know, who are on all sides of the equation who are a little over the top, which or some people are disingenuous. But you're one of the only people I actually genuinely don't know, you know,
Right.
where to place, which is probably a good thing. I mean, and you
Part of
would
that
you
is my-
necessarily
yeah.
with your job would you even say who you were going to vote for?
I think
I mean, you would.
I would.
Oh, okay.
And I think some of the ambivalence that or some of the difficulty you're having is some of my own ambivalence in the sense that Warren is an extremely impressive like operator.
Mm-hmm.
Like she's somebody who went toe to toe with Tim Geithner and body slammed him. Like beat
On
him.
which one? On the Financial Protection Bureau?
on the Financial Protection Bureau, but also he fought tooth and nail to prevent her from running it. And
Right.
She eventually did not run
Yeah, I
it,
was going to say she didn't.
but she figured out a way to be the first person to set it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a non-confirmed position because what
Mm-hmm.
Geithner was using was, well, the Republicans aren't going to confirm her, so you can't put her up. She found a loophole in the law, which she had written, that said, well, actually, the person that sets it up doesn't need to be confirmed, and you wait until the permanent director, they have to be confirmed. And so he appointed Warren to set it up, which is the most important position because that person then hires all of the staff and sets the culture for the place, and then she handpicks Richard Cordray, the person who's going to replace her.
Can we take? Don't worry, Bernie Bros. I'm gonna stick this landing in a minute. But no, I before we do that,
and you know who fought the hardest in the Senate to make her
Bernie
head of the
Sanders,
CFP?
of course,
Bernie
because
Sanders.
Bernie Sanders is the man. But before we get there, can we do a tangent? Can you remind everybody just how truly awful Tim Geithner was and is?
And the awful thing about Tim Geithner is that at the time, he wasn't even doing it for money, which almost is worse.
Had no
Like-
Wall Street, only bureaucratic background.
Yeah, like
Yep.
you can.
Except, wait, he had a brief stint at Kissinger Associates outside of graduate school.
You gotta-
which is
gotta
a
have
very
the-
weird. Yes,
Yes.
no one should forget that biographical detail.
And so he was at the New York Fed. And so as the economy is going into free fall and as Wall Street is completely collapsing, he becomes like a central figure in this drama that's playing out. And Barack Obama, who is a combination of nervous about, his ability to lead. He didn't feel like he had the confidence.
He didn't have this.
He was faking it to make it.
Right.
And he made it.
Right.
And he knew he was kind of still faking it. Like he becomes a much more left president by the end of his presidency than he was at the beginning. Like if he'd been that president at the end, it might be a completely different story. But he wasn't in the beginning. And so he brings in, he's like, oh God, the world is on fire.
Right.
I don't know what to do. This guy Geithner has been handling things over here in the Fed. Larry Summers, the idea that you would look at Larry Summers and be like, this is somebody who's going to bring stability to my administration, that's absurd.
But
he
Obama
brings
has a
in-
lot of respect and a lot of obsession with credentials.
Right.
And
And
that
nobody's
sort
more
of thing.
credentialed
And I
than-
think that, Geithner in particular, actually, it's funny because I read about him for a while and I was kind of interested in him because in some ways he's very unimpressive, just even in terms of like how he speaks. He's not a commanding performer. Like Larry Summers is repulsive, but I understand how if that's your thing, he can show up with his "I'm a big dominant egghead" thing.
Right.
Geithner just seems like a cipher. But then you read about him and it's like, right, but this guy has an absolute mastery of a particular type of technocratic game and a fake calmness, which appealed to Obama's sensibilities.
Right.
So it's an interesting dynamic.
Very similar people.
Yeah.
And he almost got derailed by the tax problems.
Yep.
He'd been ripping off the Treasury.
Yeah.
And
just like straight up not reporting income, right?
And got caught for it. He got a pass, and then Tom Daschle did not, who was going to be his Health and Human Service Secretary, also got dinged for it, and he got knifed for it. So like one of the two went down, but it wasn't Geithner.
It wasn't Geithner. No. Yeah. Obama's committed to Geithner. So I understand that. I mean, this might actually be this is an interesting conversation now for a few minutes. So like I don't have. I think part of what's going on with the Warren dynamic is definitely there is some proxy warfare going on of like, oh, well, a lot of ultra annoying, disingenuous people are supporting her, and that's bleeding into. There's no doubt about that, and that does matter to some extent because your coalition and who you're building.
It's like what are you giving off that is attracting these people?
Right.
It raises legitimate.
It raises legit. Exactly. And then the other part to me, and I think, this is like what, I don't know if you read Matt Karp's new piece in Jacobin, which I just think was.
Read most of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think he killed it. I think that to me, that's kind of like probably my best, like, right, this is someone wrote what I think. And I've been trying to articulate this kind of piece. And I wonder, like, when I think about my politics, I was somebody who, basically started doing this sort of thing to some extent, basically 4 or 5 years ago. I did all sorts of stuff in my 20s, kind of started subbing for Sam and then kind of grew out. And yeah, like I would say there was one element of, okay, there's things like Occupy, then there was Black Lives Matter, and then certainly Sanders 2016. But a major part of my political formation was really going back to being, going to World Bank protests in high school, was like, there is a politics that I actually have, and then I don't want to be completely disconnected from reality. So what is sort of available in the relative space? And, in a political system that is so extremely to the right of where I am, right? And I think that Elizabeth Warren kind of emerges in this time where it's like, you're so under siege that it's like, okay, well, here's like this really effective, committed advocate on a certain set of issues. And she probably doesn't even have, all of a sudden these debates are shockingly relevant. Like, do you think of yourself as Eugene Debs or Justice Brandeis? Right. 3 or 4 years ago, we're like, shut the fuck up, right? Like, just vote for whoever is going to like not put a Goldman person in charge of, regulating them, right? But now all of a sudden it's like, no, that actually is a distinction in perspective. And so to me, I think part of I'll wrap it up in a second because I know I'm kind of rambling, but I will say,
no,
like,
I think this is important stuff.
I think it gets to a lot because one is there is just this actually really serious differences here, and this is where other people get triggered at me because I would say these are more fun and interesting differences than a democratic socialist versus third way trash.
Right.
This is actually I would actually say a much less bureaucratic, much more clear power and labor-oriented view of politics versus a progressive technocratic one. I think that they're, Teddy Roosevelt versus FDR. I mean, these are all like imperfect analogies. And I'm clearly on one side of that. And that's where I want things to go. And I think that debate matters. And I think in a healthier politics, it could actually be a really fruitful debate. People could have it without either on one hand obscuring how big the differences are, which is what the Warren people do, or, on the other hand, I agree some people on my side go to like, she's Hillary Clinton or whatever, which I also disagree with. That's also coupled with the fact and my frustration, which is like, in the last 3 years, maybe there was a time when Elizabeth Warren first came on the scene and Bernie Sanders was a cool guy from Vermont who had an interesting brand but was just kind of basically functionally a liberal senator, but not in the last 3 years. I mean, the whole reality has changed. And now that he's putting foreign policy stuff on the table, which I can't separate, and that is actually where I would say it is fair to call Elizabeth Warren a Clinton or a Biden. I haven't seen her put anything on.
Not a Clinton or a Biden, but not a Bernie either.
I mean, she's voted for every single military increase under Trump. She doesn't have any rhetoric on civilian casualty. Substantively, she opposes the trade agreements.
The reason I draw some differences.
Tell me.
The Clinton, Biden care about imperialism.
Right.
And they want to be the executors of that project.
Right.
Whereas I think Warren doesn't care.
I think that's right. That's and if you don't care,
it's not okay.
No, but and even just setting aside the morals of it, and I'll stop in a second. If you don't care, you're definitely going to replicate the same pattern, right? Like if you're going to go after foreign policy, you better have an alternative set of ideas or people, because one, that's the most power you have out of the gate, and two, that's where there's going to be huge institutional resistance. So
the best hope for her on foreign policy is that not caring.
Yeah.
It has recently kind of blended in with her domestic policy, and so she said, "Okay, here are my instincts on domestic policy. How do I transfer those over to the foreign policy element, and bring in people who agree with me there? In other words, how do I get left-wing people who are going to then show me how to carry out a foreign policy?" But I think you're hitting on something, but it's slightly different than. But it goes to, I think, a related point, which is that she's not of the left,
right?
And there's an interesting almost identity politics going on. Like you look at her and you're clearly like, Bernie Sanders, this is a man of the left, like in every single way. Central America, LGBT stuff in the 70s. You look at his civil rights work in the 60s. You look at him talking about owning the means of production back in the 60s, 70s. Like you get like, this is what his gut's telling him is the right thing to do, and it leads you to trust basically everything he's going to do from there. Whereas Elizabeth Warren has never been a part of the left. She's not been a movement figure.
Right.
She arrived at this place in a completely different way, and at an unusual time where there was no left other than the one that Bernie was part of a marginalized piece of through the 80s and 90s. And so in the 90s, when she starts to become liberal, she's just kind of entering politics fresh. And she had this like weird right-wing legal ideology that she was into in the 70s and 80s.
And then she becomes, I think in the 90s, she becomes like a third way Democrat. My only pushback though is so sure, there is that of course, I think Bernie, because of his worldview, is going to come to the right. Like he's going to intuitively get, yes, this is why I need to call for freeing Lula, because I don't just believe in some corruption discourse. I understand how the world works.
He probably knew who Lula was in the 80s.
Right. And that's, so to me, and I'm being transparent, that's it. That's my voting decision's over there. There's nothing more to talk about.
Yeah.
But I think that, I think the way I would push back though on the idea of identity politics is it's like we're still talking about huge policy sets.
It's a complete inversion of identity politics. But
there's big difference. It's a difference of, will you use aid to do something on Israel? Bernie says it. She won't say it. Will you, where are you on these budget cuts? And then I think it does really start to emerge in domestic policy in a really interesting way, which is like the difference between, and this is, I do think it's a continuum of a broader, more centrist democratic tradition, but a more honest one of can you remove the impediments to people rising inside a class system versus really saying, not in a particularly radical way, but in a very basic way, that there are just these fundamental categories that we need to stop bullshitting with. People need to have healthcare. We need to get rid of these huge areas of debt. We need to just have baselines to recenter the gravity, the power structure in this society.
Right. Though the part I'd quibble with is the progressive, would you say progressive technocrat?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's more of like what you said earlier, I think Brandeisian, where Brandeis was strongest was when he would identify power centers. And I think what people who write about Brandeis and Warren too neglect is what gave Brandeis the power, which is the labor movement.
Right.
Like Brandeis himself can write all the papers he wants. I mean, as Supreme Court justice, he's got some power, but it takes you a while to get there.
Right.
And he only gets there because of the power of the labor movement, and the labor movement identifying the corporate concentration as an enemy. And so then he kind of elucidates this ideology that you need to break up these power centers, create freer markets. And I know people hate the idea of free markets as being a good thing, but they're better than monopolized markets.
Well, 100%, but I think that's another interesting distinction in terms of where they go in thought process.
Right.
And I agree with you, but I'm more,
But so the progressive technocrats don't think about power, whereas Warren does. Like she identifies who the people are that have power that she needs to attack, and figures out ways to attack their power. And so she will call out by name, CEOs of banks. She's gotten some fired. She's like Bernie called for breaking up the banks, and a lot of her plans are driven by the idea that these power centers need to be broken up. The right is extremely good at thinking in a mirrored version of this toward the left. They look at the left and they think, okay, what are the left's power structures? Mm-hmm. They see Planned Parenthood. Okay, Planned Parenthood, this is an organization that is out there creating health clinics and basically demonstrating that the left-wing project can be successful, that it can improve the material lives of low-income people.
Right.
And we need to destroy that.
Right.
Unions are raising the material conditions for working people. Those working people are then voting Democratic. We need to destroy unions.
Right.
Or like Acorn.
Yep.
Acorn.
And it's synchronized.
Right. Acorn is out there showing that if you organize a community together, you can get lower priced housing.
Right.
You can get a number of other community benefits. We need to destroy Acorn. So the right is very good at identifying what the left's power sources are.
Right.
And attacking them and wiping them out. Warren is looking at the right's power sources and singling them out and going after them in a way that Sanders often doesn't. Sanders will say the ruling class. Sanders will call out the millionaires and the billionaires.
Right.
But he doesn't get discreet in the way that she targets their power.
See, that's interesting because conceptually though, I think he's more on it than she is, right?
Agree.
Because it is capital. It's not just these subsidiaries.
Correct.
And then to me, that's
why I think with him as president, her as vice president, be like a devastating team. Like if she was running personnel and like day to day. Who we're going to go after, and he's setting the broad frame of the ruling class, capital versus workers. That's devastating.
Because that's the foundation. I mean, right. I mean, so that's interesting then, because actually then we do have a fair amount of agreement if what she's doing is subsumed inside this broader structure he's pointing to. I mean, that's how I
think she resists that partly because it's not who she is. She's not a person of the left, like we were saying earlier, and also partly because she probably doesn't think it plays well.
I think that I think you're right about both, and I think again that's where it actually starts. It just does feed back to like the notion of like no, there's actually really significant differences here, and I think that ultimately you're going to need to put capital in play, or we're not even going to make the attempt to do the kind of effort that we're going to need to undertake to rebalance these things.
But capital is like, unless we're going to lead a full-on revolution, like capital is expressed through the banks, through the payday lenders.
Well, there's no doubt, but Bernie has clear plans on those too, but he also has like the most radical approach to revitalizing labor unions. He has a federal jobs guarantee. I think those are the things that. And I guess when I mean technocratic, you know, it's kind of like an overused word. It doesn't necessarily even need to be negative, but it's like, what do you look at society and do you say, yes, we need to do all these things against the banks and the payday lenders and everything else, and we need good regulators and smart people writing that out. But how do you actually start to fundamentally put in place a rebalancing of the forces in society? And because even like, you know, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it's like, okay, the Republicans first, they try to gut it, but then they realize like, well, actually, we can just keep this going and use it to fuck with people, right? Like, sure, we have a new institution upon which now we can just, you know, everything else has been Orwellian named by Republicans. Great. Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. That'll be our new vehicle to screw people over with exorbitant credit card rates. But when you have a president with the conceptual understanding, and again, the ambition that he's putting on the table, and that's really where I'm starting to get, you know, frustrated, because it's like, I think some people have been saying for quite some time, you know, I want somebody to run for president who will talk about the military-industrial complex. I want somebody to run for president who will be unapologetic and clear about single payer, who has a strategy for labor. And it's like, okay, well, you got it. He's doing it.
Yeah.
No one else has put this on the table. So I think that is where it's, and I think that also is the dividing line in their coalition. It's not to me that she might potentially reach out to a broader set of people, although I might be I'm definitely more skeptical of her ability to do that than you, but you might know that better than me because you've been following her.
Oh, you mean in a general?
In a general. I actually have real concerns about that.
I think he's a stronger candidate in the general.
Yeah, I have super, and
I
again,
think he's a weaker candidate in the primary and a stronger candidate in the general.
Definitely, for sure. But I think that that where it go, I notice now a pattern in every conversation I have from people who obsess about this stuff and do this stuff professionally or don't, that dividing line really does actually start to become very clear, which is, I want someone who plans and implements and I tune out, versus I recognize on some level that this is going to involve a much broader democratic buy-in and a serious confrontation with power, and not a discrete one. You know, not this particular CEO is a scumbag, this particular industry is run amok, but like, actually there is a big picture problem here, and it's going to require more than a redirection from the top. And I do see that, and you know, and that's how they chose to run the campaign.
Yeah, and I don't have any answers here, because the problem is, you're trying to win a 50% plus one majority in a country that's the center of the global empire,
right?
Where millions and millions of people are suffering, but it's a wealthy country relative to the rest of the world,
right?
Where people are demanding, constant growth, and are quick to, swing right.
Yep.
My whole book is about putting the most progressive agenda forward that you can, and bringing people on board. At the same time, it's like I said, it's a center of the global empire,
right? And
so, what does a working class socialist project look like at the center of, it's like the Roman Empire. You wouldn't expect Rome to be the place that's going to see the workers' revolution. On the other hand, even in Rome, there would have been a lot of pissed off people.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, there's quite a few pissed off people in this Rome. And there's also, the peripheries, yeah.
And so one idea could be, okay, we're going to bring revolution, but it's going to be orderly. I don't know.
But then that gives me to the other contradiction that I see. I mean, and this isn't, I mean, I think it's most acute with her because she has put some more ambitious things on the table, which is, if you're going to go for it, let's just go for it, right? Because, I mean, even Joe Biden's healthcare plan, as it is written, would piss some people off and require some significant...
The industry is already spending against it.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So even that...
If you get that implemented today, be amazing.
Right. So you have one candidate who has the I'm going to put the actual plans on the table, We're not going to bullshit. And I'm the only one with that buy-in. I'm the only one who has more individual donors than Trump. And I'm the only one who seems to conceptually understand that there is a bigger picture problem here. And I think that also does have to go with how both of them imagine the past. I mean, look, obviously, I don't want Bernie to start running around and go, we were a settler colonial society from the beginning, and we suck. Don't eat hot dogs. Go to the Brattleboro Food Co-op and apologize. I don't think that that's a winning national message. But I do think, and I actually think, by the way, in terms of credibility with a broader set of working class people, the fact that he's willing, he'll herald amazing things in American history, like Eugene Debs and parts of the New Deal, which we should totally own and build off of. But it's also like, yeah, this guy does not have a rose-colored view of the past. And I actually think that some of that really translates now, because I think also on the flip side of, in terms of us being a global empire and a global economy, even the idea of we can just sort of like restore some kind of more stable meritocracy that's less like craven and corrupt. It's like, I don't actually know about that, once again, unless you have the global viewpoint and unless you have this broader take on capital viewpoint. But
yeah. Part of it is just self-affirming or self-negating, and we're going to get to watch it play out. Right. In that, Bernie's idea is that he's going to recreate a new coalition in the Democratic Party, that he can win the nomination with a working class coalition. It's currently tilting especially the people who come out for the primary in a wealthier direction. We saw 2018, ton of Whole Foods districts, swing towards Democrats. And so a lot of those people agree with Bernie's message. They're not exactly here for the entire class war.
Well, that's Karp's critique, though. That's the Patagonia road to socialism. And I agree with him. And I think, to me, like, that's what's happening, right? Is that the Bernie coalition, the nerds who don't really want to do stuff are going to Warren, and the cranks are going to Tulsi and Yang. Right, and you don't have to co-sign.
No, yeah, and so, but here's the thing: that nobody needs to complain about it, because, in other words, according to Karp's logic, Bernie and Warren are not competing at all, for different people. Bernie's trying to get new people to come out, the working class people that he's identifying, whereas Warren is getting these PMCs who are fed up with their situation, or some of them are not, and they're just kind of deluded.
No, I like the summary. I have two questions for you then before we get to these sounds. I mean, well, I guess, wait, I don't know, a question and a comment. My question is then, because does that actually, though, just in terms of where you're coming from politically, start to give you much bigger pause about Warren on just purely coalition grounds?
So yes and no. I mean, right. Yes, like I think Bernie builds a coalition that has a much better chance, I think, of winning the general election. I think there was an N+1 piece on the professional managerial chasm, I think it was called. I don't know if it was a response to Karp's piece or Karp's
No, it was before Karp's piece. They would have never embarrassed themselves if it came out. Right. They wouldn't write that after Karp's piece.
So, the piece was saying that, like, the professional managerial class is basically also at the whim of the ruling class, and that it is susceptible to being won over in a coalition with the working class. And I could see an argument where somebody like a Warren could stitch together a coalition of the PMC and the working class. At the same time, so could Bernie, because let's not fool ourselves, like, a ton of Bernie's supporters are also PMC. Right. All of the ones that we know of publicly are. Matt Karp teaches at Princeton, doesn't he?
Yes. I was going to say, speaking of which, yeah, right, exactly. Like, and as an example, the great Matt Karp is literally a professor at Princeton University. Right, exactly.
And what was the other question?
Oh, and the critique I have, though, is that I think in the broader electorate, when you go and you talk to normal people, and when you talk to normal people, that's when you meet people who, or even see people on Twitter. Like the great example, one time Felix Biederman said on this show was he saw a Twitter exchange where Ilhan Omar, like right at the height of her getting, terrorized and piled on. Some guy tweeted at her and he said, thank you, Congresswoman. You have a lot of integrity, solid there. I don't always agree with you, but clearly, blah, 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 you're a good person. And then it's just like, boy, you and Trey Gowdy are the only people that give me any hope for American politics, right?
There's that.
So when you get out into the broader electorate, I remember I knew a woman once who she liked Bernie, but was also incredibly, frankly, extremely financially self-interested and highly affluent. So her liking Bernie might have just been like Jewish identity politics. Was depressed, physically ill that Biden didn't run. Adored Obama. Trump was a little too crazy for her, but she would not vote for Hillary. But if Trump was going to be president, a good thing might be that Newt Gingrich might get a cabinet position.
Well, yeah.
So yes, when you go out into the world, people are all over the place. And it might well be that if you talk into certain, that there's a chunk of Biden voters to take for Bernie and non-voters. But where I've never liked this, they're not competing, so don't critique each other or clarify, is it's like, in the realm we're in, that's literally all who's competing. Right. Like that. There's no one in this space. I don't even see people on. I feel bad for Joe Biden in terms of I have never encountered anybody who's just like, yeah, I support the guy. Right. Everybody in this space is making some Sanders versus Warren argument. And I think, frankly, some of us were way too late and actually saying, wait a second, there's really significant, if we support Sanders, really being clear about those differences. So I think in the space we're in, I just don't truck that kind of argument.
But I guess the other part of that is who needs to hear that argument? Who is a Bernie supporter that doesn't know Bernie is a Democratic socialist who supports Medicare for all, Green New Deal, $15 minimum wage, fights for workers.
But I think it's the stuff we're talking about that's getting clarified, because I think there's plenty of people that, just like in 2016, if 2016, I remember this. I remember being like, man, I hope Elizabeth Warren runs against Hillary Clinton. Now, I know if you sat me down and you did a real political analysis, absolutely, I would say no. I want structure. I want somebody who can at least somewhat put capital into play. I would have had all these conversations. So I actually think heading into 2019, partially because the press coverage was so massaging over of their differences, that it actually did get a lot of people on both sides of the equation.
No, that's interesting.
Because I hear that from people all the time. I hear people saying there's no difference all the time. And to me, one, and maybe I'm on my hobby horse here, but I'm sorry. I think you do have some obligation to look at international affairs, and I actually think that's like a chasm of difference. Actually, I think that's significant, and maybe you could absolutely be right in terms of, I think Biden and Clinton have more of an interest, but her foreign policy is not good, and how she answers questions on foreign policy is totally America.
Yeah, you never know. You never know what you're going to get, because she's kind of just coming to it.
But even just the Council on Foreign Relations stuff that she did about Africa, talking about population growth and this just highly paternalistic. That's disturbing to me. I think any of these people, by the way, who are in any way,
right.
So I actually think that was,
I bet it comes from some folks. I don't know if it's her staff or her, read some papers, but they're just not embedded enough in the conversation to be like, oh, actually, it's true that these cities are overpopulated and it's causing problems, and there's too many 22-year-old kids, and that's causing social problems. But you don't talk about population problems for these imperial related reasons, and they're lacking that connection to the movement, to the kind of the embeddedness in the left that would have prevented that.
Yeah, but I don't think that so to me, I don't want to keep repeating myself here, but I actually think there was a ton of things where it was like, when I could have multiple conversations with people that didn't know the difference on either really clear policy stuff like all student debt versus another, some student debt, or no, actually the implications from, Venezuela to Iran to, she said in the same questionnaire, she said, Iran needs to get back into compliance. What? We all know the reason why this thing fell apart. So, that stuff to me is very disturbing, and actually you know, if we all are just sort of running around saying, oh, well, they're competing for different voters and they're both lovely, we're actually missing, you know, it isn't all just sort of like branding and point scoring. Although some of it is like, no,
not to draw any attention away from your program, but there aren't many foreign policy voters. Like if we're going to take it back to voters.
Well,
like
sadly, but again,
like,
in the world we're in, there's a hell of a lot of self-styled people who claim to care about X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go.
The number of them.
Sure. If I was on, you know, Meet the Press, maybe I'd talk about a different set of things. But Ivor, the people that we're talking to are the people who, you know, read the developments in Indonesia with great concern. Yeah. So there you go.
I would 1,000% co-sign that one.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, patreon.com/TMBS.
Yeah, because Ryan, you need to grow that.
Yes. You need to grow that consciousness. Let's play. All right. Let's. That's what I mean by consciousness. All right, which one should we start with?
Let's do Bernie hitting Biden.
Review. Okay, Bernie hitting Biden. This did you expect this, Ryan? What did you expect to happen last night?
I did expect Bernie to hit Biden.
Okay.
Yeah, I felt like practically, if there was one thing that was going to get him out of that hospital bed, it was going to be that I think he regretted not hitting Biden in the last debate, because if you watched him in the spin room afterwards, he had prepared remarks blasting away at Biden with like one camera in his face in the spin room and 5 people watching.
I wonder why he didn't deliver. That's fascinating. Okay, and then real quick before we play this last question, are you surprised that she didn't hit Biden? Is she waiting for something?
I want her to hit Biden because I think if she is going to do what we talked about earlier, which is create a left working class PMC coalition that's going to like take on power, she has to make that argument now to earn the mandate to do it. And I think she's not doing it because she's like that biker in that video where like you can see the finish line. She's in front. Like
she doesn't want. She's
holding
the ball.
Why
she's trying to count down the 4th quarter?
Just ride.
Right. Word. All right. Let's check this out. This is a great moment.
That'll get you to win, but it won't get you to change the country, which is.
And also, it won't get you. I mean, I'm not. When I tell people I'm scared of Warren going up against Trump, that is not just Bernie propaganda. I mean, a year ago, I thought most of these people might be able to beat Trump, and now I'm getting like increasingly terrified the more I watch these things, because Trump is no joke.
Trump reelected after an impeachment would be extremely dangerous.
In word. All right, let's check this out.
For a total of 4 months. 4 months. Where do you get the rest? Where does it come from? 2 things.
We have a QuickTime issue, so I'm just going to refresh here. One second.
Cool. Okay, here we go. We're good.
For a total of 4 months. 4 months. Where do you get the rest? Where does it come from?
He's ready.
Senator Sanders, respond.
In 2 ways. Joe, you talked about working with Republicans and getting things done. But you know what you also got done, and I say this as a good friend. You got the disastrous war in Iraq done. You got a bankruptcy bill, which is hurting middle-class families all over this country. You got trade agreements like NAFTA and PNTR with China done, which have cost us 4 million jobs. And let's get to Medicare for all. Let's be honest. We spend twice as much per person as do the people of any other major country on earth. And the answer is, if we have the guts, and I would like to see the Democratic Party have that guts, to stand up to the drug companies and the insurance companies and tell them that the function of health care is to guarantee care to all people, not to make $100 billion in profit. If we stood together, we could create a great.
That was a great moment.
Yeah, and it was what people have been waiting for. And you know, people on his staff and close to him begging for that. For months, and I think a lot of his supporters have been begging for it. And if the Bernie that we saw last night had been there the entire campaign, I think it'd be a different election right now. I don't think he's out of it by any stretch.
I was going to say, I mean, don't you think? I mean, and by the way, I always say, like, in the positive sense, I think Bernie absolutely can still win this thing. And then in like the depressing sense, Joe Biden could still pull this out. I mean, maybe not. It's starting. He is really starting to tread. Yeah, that's true. But it's still relatively early, is my point.
Right. I mean, there's still polls that have him hanging in. His supporters, surveys show, are the least likely to be following the news, which means it's
good for him.
It's good for him because they didn't watch that. They were watching the ball game, or they weren't watching anything, or they're working, whatever. And so they're going to be the slowest to drop away from him when it just kind of permeates the political atmosphere that he's dead.
Right.
Which actually is terrible for Pete Buttigieg or whoever wants to replace him, because if Biden's corpse won't like get out of the top tier, there's no room for.
You don't want to use corpse language with that guy now.
Eye bleeding, teeth falling out.
Oh my gosh.
So it leaves Bernie with a path.
Yep.
You know, if he surprises in Iowa, it could be the only time when the media's utter disregard and contempt for Sanders actually pays off to his benefit, because his winning Iowa would be such a surprise. Like, wait a minute, nobody even told us he was running except when he had a heart attack.
Right.
And now he's won Iowa. That could, launch him into New Hampshire. He's well set up in Nevada, because it's a working class, and it's a caucus state. A ton of service workers there.
Right.
And because it's a caucus, you can organizing pays off a lot more than it does in a primary state where TV and other mass media helps a lot more. And then you roll into Super Tuesday from there, where he already has, serious organizing operations in California and a bunch of the other Super Tuesday states. But so a lot of it depends on I mean, not a lot of it. To me, I think everything depends on Iowa.
Really? Yeah. I mean,
because if he comes out of Iowa, Iowa has this 15% threshold.
Right.
Where if you're under 15%, you get 0.
Right.
And so if anybody comes in under 15%, they're effectively dead, because now they're coming into New Hampshire, and New Hampshire voters, they self-style themselves as president pickers. So
it's such a fucking ludicrous system.
Pathetic.
Can I just say, like, as a side, like, what are we talking
like
about?
Dr. Seuss.
and apologies to the Tulsi fans, but she stood up.
No, they already hate this show, man.
She stood up on. I bet they do. Actually, she stood up on behalf of Iowa and New Hampshire voters recently and said she was going to boycott the debate because the media and the DNC were winnowing the field rather than, in the past, Iowa and New Hampshire winnowing the field. And I think she's actually right, that she's observing a real trend that is happening, that it is the media. You have a 2-year-long campaign.
Right.
Iowa can't do the whole job for you anymore.
Right.
I don't necessarily, I don't love that it would be the DNC and the corporate media, not just the corporate media, but the rest of the media. But on the other hand, really, Iowa, New Hampshire, that's the best we can do.
It's. I mean, look, all love, but it's ludicrous.
So that's why it kills you if you die in Iowa. Then New Hampshire voters don't want to vote for you, and particularly if he gets beaten by Warren, where Massachusetts and New Hampshire are right next to each other, that would give Warren then Iowa and then New Hampshire, and from that point she's got a lot of momentum.
But I mean. Yeah, but it strikes right. But like, okay, and people are saying Biden's done in Iowa. I don't know.
Biden is such a hack. He's barely hired much staff in Iowa. He's barely raised any money. He has. It just came out yesterday. He's $9 million.
It was under 9.
Yeah, under $9 million cash on hand.
Crazy.
And he probably owes consultants 8 of that already.
Right.
So, and who wants to give him money at this point? All the money's going to Pete anyway. I mean, there's a lot of money, so not all of it is going to him. But
I'd vote for Joe over Pete. I just want to put that down on the record very clearly. I would definitely vote for Biden.
My God,
I loathe Pete Buttigieg.
I have never thought about that choice before.
It's a painful choice, right?
Eating me up.
I'm sorry to do that to you. We could think of, all right, let's go to happier things. Look, I thought this was hysterical because speaking of, I mean, this is somebody who really has, this is probably the biggest. I've been really wrong about this. I thought that Harris was an extremely strong contender for the center-right lane. And you know, obviously I have any number of major substantive problems with her, from the fact that, I mean, actually, even in this thing, before she loads up this ridiculous attack, she talks about a two-tier justice system. This is the woman who put truant mothers in jail and let Steve Mnuchin walk.
That was a two-tier justice system.
Yeah, I was going to say, I guess you would be pretty familiar with that. But she's goofy. Like, that's the only word. It's so weird, because when she first came out, I said, you know what? You know, she's polished, she's smart, like she's got a lot of these attributes.
Charisma.
She's got a certain charisma if you're into sociopaths.
Who's not?
Which I am, of course, particularly. I'm totally. Well, believe me, I've dealt with Kamala Harris. But
did she drop your charges?
No.
You got papered
to the fullest. But check this out. I mean, and also it is really funny to catch. If you look at Warren's body language, it's very funny.
Argument he's making, but I do want to also say this. What we're talking about is a grave injustice when rules apply to some but not equally to all, and in particular when the rules that apply to the powerless don't apply to the powerful.
Pause
and so, Senator Warren,
I just have to say, I'm watching this last night, and two things are going through my mind. One is this really what you want to say, Steve Mnuchin, non-prosecutor? And then the second part of me, as a strong Sanders advocate, is like, great, get some of those percentage points back. What do you got in store?
Grave injustice.
Let's see. I was like,
grave injustice. She's setting up something big here.
That's what I'm saying, Ryan Grimm.
Injustice.
Exactly. I was like, whoa. I literally thought, because look, Joe Biden has attacked her policing record. I'm like, is she going to talk about Elizabeth Warren's asbestos work? Like, what is she going to do here? The Dow chemical stuff? Like, I mean, anything could happen. I'm ready. Let's do this. Let's get 4 points back from Warren. Bernie's having a great night. Let's take a chunk out of Warren. All right, Harris, go for it. I believe in you.
the rules that apply to the powerless don't apply to the powerful. And so, Senator Warren, I just want to say that I was surprised to hear that you did not agree with me that on this subject of what should be the rules around corporate responsibility for these big tech companies, when I called on Twitter to suspend Donald Trump's account, that you did not agree, and I would urge you to join me, because here we have Donald Trump, who has 65 million Twitter followers, and is using that platform as the President of the United States to openly intimidate witnesses, to threaten witnesses, to obstruct
She's
justice.
still smirking.
And he and his account should be taken down. We saw in El Paso that shooter in his manifesto was informed by how Donald Trump uses that platform. And
like, not only his Twitter platform.
Yeah, I was going to say, well,
probably a bit broader than
I mean,
the
we don't even
tweets.
need to play the rest of it. That's
Because
just
that's the funny thing. She's identified this grave injustice, and now she's putting her on the spot. Are you going to condemn this grave injustice? And then she veers off into another thing about El Paso and some other stuff. And so Warren's just like, eventually she stops smirking. She's just like, okay, tell me when you're done. So we can do the Twitter, get back to the Twitter thing.
Well, and it was funny. Warren's response wasn't even that amazing, but it's like when you play like tennis with somebody who has like an incredibly hacky game and you just can't even get like the rhythm of the stroke. You're like, okay, I don't really know what we're doing here. Yeah, I guess let me try to make a point about campaign funding. I guess you're harassing me about Trump's Twitter account.
But what? It's so bad. It would have been great if Warren would have taken her seriously, like, but in a mocking way. Like,
Oh, totally.
What about at POTUS, Kamala? Like, he has not actually abused the terms of service with the verified at POTUS
So
account.
you need to look at the loopholes. You need to get serious.
Yeah. And he
Presidential races are about serious.
See, terms of service need big structural change, not just these one-off solutions. But look, wouldn't he be able to tweet from POTUS? Why not? I'm pretty sure he's still
pretty
POTUS.
sure he could. He is. Well, that was actually the very. I also love this. Like, the best thing that Donald Trump. I'm sorry that his Twitter provides also a lot of laughs and entertainment for people. Like,
also counts of the indictment.
I know, it's like, yeah, right. Like, actually, practically, you know what? Matt, can we indulge ourselves here and just do a minute of that video before we get to these endorsements? The one we were playing before the show. I want to share with Ryan Grimm.
Okay, that is true. He does know a lot of tough guys, but they're stupid.
Yeah, when he was talking about Columbus the other day, I was like, I know a lot of guys like Columbus, connected guys. Guys with a lot of skills. Oh my God. It just
half of that stuff is like him making fun of Ben Carson.
That's literally half
which
of it
is
him making
that
fun
was
of Ben Carson
the golden
stabbing
era
story.
before he'd won the primary when he was still attacking all those guys.
You're right.
What was his nickname for Ben?
I don't even remember, actually. That's a good point.
Did he try like Sleepy Ben or something?
I
like
think
that?
it was something like
Yeah,
that.
Sleepy Ben, I think. Yeah.
I think it was Sleepy Ben. But the best riffs on Carson were him literally being in Iowa, being like, and then he stabbed his friend, and he's beating me. What's wrong with you people? He literally asked,
making
what's
fun of
wrong
Ben
with
Carson's
you?
redemption lies.
You're right. I hope everybody
Ben
enjoyed
Carson's
that.
Popeyes story, right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Ben Carson's that was amazing. That was like a post-redemption story. He's just like, yeah, go rob him. That's where the money's at.
Awful.
Just a bad person.
No, you're like a brain surgeon.
Yeah, even in
You
his
have the money.
fantasies.
No, like
Not
Ben
the-
Carson's like legit, like not a good person. That's why
Oh.
I was like, that's kind of charming almost. All right.
I don't know what the statute of limitations is, but if an administration went back and looked at what his campaign did and where that money went, he and his whole family, I think, would be locked up.
No, they
It's
wouldn't.
a gigantic grift.
Shut up, Ryan. Fuck you. That's the part I like about him, though, is that he's like all sleepy, and then sometimes he just would snap randomly. It wasn't grift.
I loved how he didn't know basic things about his department.
But spent like 50 grand on silverware. Although it's amazing, like in the
table.
scheme of this administration, it's just like, yeah,
whatever.
Ben's just at HUD making people homeless, whatever, terrorizing people in public housing, which most administrations do.
being.
All right,
Regardless
Ryan.
of their ethnicities or their background, they have a brain. The human brain. There is nothing in this universe that even begins to compare with the human brain.
Ryan, you know who agrees with me about Bernie Sanders and his multiracial coalition and winning the presidency?
Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar and AOC. Ilhan Omar is absolutely my favorite member of Congress. I think she's the only other person besides Bernie Sanders that I've ever contributed money to. And I think that she actually does outline this very well in this endorsement video.
I am so proud to endorse Senator Bernie Sanders for president. Senator Bernie Sanders is the only candidate that has built a movement and continues to build a movement that transcends gender, ethnicity, religion, and we know that in order to take on Trump, we're going to need a unifier, someone who understands what the fight looks like, and someone who is ready to defeat him. I'm one of the people that was inspired by the movement that the senator has built. There was an America that I dreamed about. There's an America that most people believe in. It is an ideal. It's not reality yet. And he started the work of organizing for that America, and that has inspired me to get involved and run myself to help others also organize for that America. One of the amazing things I think about the senator is that he understands we have to find solutions to our greatest problems. We don't wait for what the poll numbers are on proposing a particular solution. The senator is the only candidate that is proposing a complete cancellation of student debt. The senator is the only candidate that is proposing to provide universal school meals. The senator is the only candidate that wants to make sure that we end our endless wars and will fight for human rights and hold everyone accountable regardless of whether they are an ally or a foe. The senator is someone who understands that our movement isn't just for few, it's for everyone. The senator is the only candidate that isn't about leaning a particular way, but being true to yourself and fighting for what you believe regardless of what the obstacles are. This is not just the fight for our lives, this is the fight for our democracy, this is the fight for a better future, one that we can all be proud of.
So I'll throw it to you, but I mean, one, I would expect her to endorse Bernie Sanders because I think she has very real politics and, you know, clear commitment. So I would expect her to endorse him. But it also strikes me that when she was really getting terrorized a couple of months ago, he backed her in such a clear, unequivocal way. I wonder how much you think that played in it too. 'Cause it sort of followed
even before AOC, right?
Oh yeah,
yeah.
And it was very reflective. I mean, it was Sanders, good, perfect, clear. Warren, decent-ish. And then it descended.
She had a like nobody should attack.
Yeah,
anybody.
that type of thing. It wasn't a clear, direct. And then it, you know, I think by the time you got to Gillibrand said that she should be deported.
Right. What's she doing here?
Yeah, exactly. I think by the time Gillibrand was like, I'd like to recommend her for a lean-in summit, and then I'd like her escorted out of the country because you're not allowed to criticize Israel anywhere.
Her TPS is up. Yeah.
Right. I mean, what do you make of the significance of this one?
I think that was well. I think you're probably right that people remember, you know, who supports them when they're, you know, under fire, you know, when they're really getting hit. I think, you know, for Bernie to come out of the heart attack, his first event since then is the debate. He comes out, he's loose, he's lively, he's fiery, he's hitting Biden, he's smiling.
He really was
like,
great.
He was
like best I've ever seen him debate.
Like he's somebody you can look at and be like, yeah, that guy could be president, and it'd be fun if he was president. Like even if you're a normie,
right?
Like because like a lot of normies are like, look, do I want this person? And everybody's like, do I want this person in my face for 4 years? I think that's a problem for Warren. Like, do people want to be told what they're doing wrong for 4 years?
Right.
And people might not articulate it that way, but they can feel that. And sometimes with Bernie, you're like, he's great, but I don't need 4 years of that.
Right. That's like the Rogan bit that I did where, you know, Bernie's on Rogan and he's like, I did DMT and I was in Burlington and I looked at Jane and I realized we're part of the same fabric of the same universe and a kaleidoscope of energy, and therefore it is disgraceful that 1% of the population control 99% of that energy. Yes, he's that sort of thing you're talking about.
He still did that once or twice in the debate last night, where it's this thing that his staff does try to get him over, where he will seize the stage, seize the moment, and then move into that stump speech.
I think it's good. I think it's really good though when it's balanced by other things.
Yeah,
I would never want to lose that entirely.
No, you can't lose.
It's just the whole time you can't do that.
Right.
I think that's why it was good last night.
But so he comes out of great debate performance, and then Ocasio-Cortez endorsement, and then Rashida Tlaib endorsement, Ilhan Omar endorsement, leading into the rally on Saturday, which probably break act blew. They probably who knows what ungodly amount of money they raised last night from people who were like, he's back.
Yeah, totally.
And so it gives him what we were talking about earlier, like that credible shot rolling into Iowa, because he has a ground operation that the likes of which has never been built before, including in 2016. They were building a good operation by the end of January of 2016, but by that point they'd already voted in Iowa, and like Claire Sandberg, who's now his director of national organizing, put it best. She said, by the time the plane was ready to take off, we'd run out of runway.
Right.
And so they had the last several years to build this operation.
Did you write about very well in your book?
Yeah, and so now but that operation needs a candidate and needs a message and needs energy around it, and now it has that. So the pieces are in place for it to come together.
I want to get to Nina Turner talking about AOC, and then we'll take a brief break and go to the post game. Ryan has to get out of here by 9:30, but we'll do some of the post game together. It's 8:40, so we'll. But before we get to Nina Turner,
there's that great jank question of Chris Coons. Did you see that one?
Oh, we should find that for the post game. That's a great idea. We'll do that in the post game. That was very funny. Chris Coons scurrying around like a smarmy, disgusting bastard while janked us is like, that's not very progressive. Coot's like, hey, I'm progressive, leave me alone. So no, but we'll definitely get to that. But my actually one question, real quick. I love the campaign that Bernie's running in many ways, and there's someone like Brianna Joy. I mean, she used to be on the show all the time. Like I have some connection to it.
My old colleague.
Yeah, your old colleague, exactly. Awesome people. On the flip side, is it, and I don't mean him specifically, but it could be him, frankly, but like, is it also on the flip side missing like the Tad Devine component? Like somebody where you could just say like, I thought that he gave a socialism speech was fine. I didn't think that was, some people thought it was a problem. I think he actually needed to do something like that. But what I would have done is then put out like multiple ultra slick ads with FDR clips, and not internet viral, like TV ads on cable and basic cable. So is the campaign missing? They're doing something new, which is inspiring and what we need to do, and he's assembling it, and I hope people will not miss how unique this opportunity is. But on the flip side, where's the Devine piece? Are they missing that?
Yeah, look, and I like and I'm friends with basically his entire staff.
Right.
But I agree with you.
Yeah.
And, Tad Devine came in for a ton of criticism. I haven't delved into it. Who knows if it's just or not. Some bizarre links with Paul Manafort and some weird.
He consulted in Ukraine. I mean, look, Tad Devine has done look, I think the stuff he did in Bolivia is way dirtier. But the point I'm making is it's still a skill set to run for president.
And that's exactly right. And whether it's Tad Devine or somebody else, I think that the left has gone too far in the condemnation of consultants. Like consultants are people with particular skills. You don't want consultants who rip you off and take your money and do bubblegum. But go back to 2016, watch some of those Bernie ads and try not to cry. And then go back and watch the ads that the campaign is producing this year and try to get through them. They're fine.
This is real.
It's Bernie.
I showed to someone who, she's very close to me and knows this stuff and, cares, but, this isn't her lot. Tad Devine did an ad for Bernie when he announced in February, and then they were out like a couple days later. But do you remember that ad?
And they replaced it with like an 8-minute.
Which in some ways I was like, okay, that's Bernie doing Bernie. But I played, and I've done this with a few people, I played that Tad ad from February and the first national one that they released 2 weeks ago. And it is like watching like Rocky versus like, like a back catalog episode of Cheers. I mean, it's like, whoa. I mean, that would be the only area that I would have real substantive criticism of. Like, there's a part of this that's cinematic.
I almost feel partly responsible in the sense that a lot of my reporting has been critical of the like corrupt consultant class, and it has glamorized or valorized organizing over television to the point where I wonder if the left is taking it too far. Like, no. I hate to tell you, television still matters. Like, millions of people are still sitting in front of that tube, and that is a way to move them. And not only that, if you produce one like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did during her ad, which emotionally moves you, you share it, and it gets hundreds of thousands of views. Those are free views for you, and it disrupts the money element. That matters. And so both Warren and Sanders are doing their ads in-house, and I hope it works out for them. But some of these consultants are good. Most of them are hacks. But and we're not talking about ideology at this point. We're talking about just craft. Like,
literally craft.
Like and creating an emotional 30-second ad, not easy. Like, because by the time you've built up the thing, it's over. But there's a reason that people do get paid significant amounts of money, because if you do it right, it can change the game. Entire campaigns have been won and lost over ads with powerful advertising.
That's really my, people always, they'll say like, I'm not going to do, criticism of Bernie just to like, show that I can be contrarian or whatever. I totally support the guy. I'm very in line. I like how the campaign is doing things. But that would be definitely my one constructive criticism.
Yeah, and by the way,
where are the super conventional, super slick ads.
And for the people who think I'm a Warren stan, like hers have been lame too.
Oh, sure.
Like they're fine. Start walking through stadiums or whatever, but like nothing that people are sharing with you and be like, you got to watch this, and like by the end of it, you want to open up your wallet and just start giving money.
And it'll be funny because then if like those actual skill sets go to Biden, Buttigieg, Harris, like okay, but
I haven't seen a lot of Buttigieg. Biden's are good.
Biden's are good, but there's nothing.
And that might be one reason why he's bleeding out of his eyes and is still hanging in at 20+%.
Right. I think that's a yes.
It matters.
I think you're 100% right. Let's play real quick, and then we're going to the post game. This is Nina Turner confirming that AOC is going to be endorsing Bernie to Cenk. Nina Turner is a total force.
One last question for you. Washington Post just reported that the special guest is going to be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the Queens, and she's going to endorse Bernie Sanders. Is that correct?
Yes, the Congresswoman is going to endorse Senator Bernard Sanders, and very much in keeping, Cenk, as you know, in 2016, the senator won 5 million more votes than Mr. Trump and Secretary Clinton among the millennial class. He set in motion the foundation where an Ocasio-Cortez could be Congresswoman, and other people who came in her class in 2018. This is a beautiful thing to enhance and accentuate the fact that young people in this country know where the vitality and the vigor is, and it is with a 78-year-old man by the name of Bernard Sanders by way of Brooklyn in Vermont who is holding it down. So if anybody has any concerns about him, I got to quote the great LL Cool J, who said, "Don't call it a comeback, baby. I've been here for years." And that's Senator Bernie Sanders. I'm going to knock you out. Mama said, knock you out. Establishment class, Senator Bernard Sanders is coming for you, and he has a team of people all around him, from the everyday people of this nation to people like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, who is standing up saying he is the one to lead this country to transcendence.
Yeah, and she's right. And this isn't, and she's not right at like just a 30,000 foot level. This is something, I go into in detail in the book, that very particular people in the Sanders campaign in 2016 who helped build this innovative organizing operation that is now his best shot in 2020, left and created the organization that eventually became Justice Democrats, which it's ironic that it's Cenk up there, because Cenk and TYT agreeing to direct their viewers to fund Justice Democrats, pumped more than $2 million small dollars into them in the beginning and kind of made them viable. That and the bizarre circumstance of having this guy, Shroykat Chakrabarti, who was a millionaire from Silicon Valley, who had left to join the Bernie campaign and then to help out with Justice Democrats, and then became AOC's chief of staff before getting pushed out by Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries. But
not good.
Yeah, no, not good. She's exactly right that team, Alexandra Rojas, who's the current head, was in community college during the Bernie Sanders campaign and was identified by Zach Exley as this incredible volunteer organizer, and they brought her on as an intern. And so she meets Corbin Trent, who sold his food trucks to join the Bernie Sanders campaign, and the three of them end up founding Justice Democrats, which then turns all of its firepower to elect Ocasio-Cortez. So not just on the level of ideological inspiration and motivation, which was a necessary part of it and very much did exist, but also functionally, like it created the actual people and the operations that could bring Ocasio-Cortez to Congress. And Justice Democrats backed Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib too.
Right. And those are the three. I mean,
they changed the game.
They're the lights. I have, in my case, particularly, I am a unapologetic Ilhan Omar stan. There's Lula, then basically Ilhan and Bernie.
There you go.
It's basically the sending order. So
has Ilhan talked about Lula yet?
She signed the letters. Yeah. She's always there. I mean, that's another thing you can really trace. Like, some of my hesitation around AOC has been on foreign policy.
Yeah,
Presley.
She's a little like Warren on that front.
Yeah.
Where it's not that she's bad on it. And it's not that she's totally uninterested. It's just
She's
like,
better than Warren.
Like as she said in that one interview where she face planted after her primary win, she's like, I'm not a geopolitics expert. Like,
right.
It's just not her. And I think she can get there. Like, we can't all be everything.
I mean, it's a balance though to me of like, we can't all be everything, but I do think that you don't have to have like a specialization in like as a politician in like say like healthcare policy, but there still is like a specific set that you have to buy into, and I think like that is why like people like a guy like Daniel Bessner that I do a lot of stuff with, and other people I think are helping to build the template so that actually somebody can kind of say like, hey, I do have a sense of like regime change efforts in Venezuela.
And I think with AOC, you can say she has the right instincts.
Totally.
Like,
I think so.
Al Jazeera, I actually think their tagline, I don't know if they still use it, but I thought was a useful way of describing what the instinct should be. They said we're on the other end of the gun.
Yes.
So with AOC, you could tell like she saw herself as on the other end of the gun.
Right.
And particularly during the campaign when she stood up, for the
when
Gazans
she stood up for Gaza,
during the
and
massacre.
Gaza's still another, and that's why Tlaib
but then she didn't. And then where she got caught up is she didn't quite understand why people were so bothered by what she thought was just basic common sense, that you should not gun down protesters in cold blood. Because she hadn't been immersed in it, she's like, well, what on earth is wrong with a blanket moral statement that says you should not kill unarmed people who are protesting?
Well, I think it actually brings us into a whole other conversation of like part of my critiques of like toxic and misuses of identity politics go back as somebody who has partially Jewish identity has been like, yeah, and I'm still going to oppose an apartheid state. And I think that I think she got a little bit tripped up on that because she was blindsided, but then she gave a lot of very cynical and disingenuous people who have a discourse that sounds very woke about a particular Jewish identity in this case, who are really just running interference on, literally just, look, IDF soldiers post their own videos on Facebook of, I literally just clipped that kid. I mean, that's what it is. And, there's no debate about it. And the other thing, that AOC, I thought particularly, there was a moment where I thought she was really at her worst on Middle East stuff, and she was not being clear on Iran. She was way too much prevaricating. And what I thought was interesting, though, is that the New York Times did a piece about how, AIPAC, in their arrogance, they're like, oh, yeah, we're going to get rid of Iran and Tlaib. And AOC was still on that list. And I remember being like, the
list of people that they were going to get rid of?
They were going to want a primary, or they didn't anticipate staying in Washington very long because, they didn't get it or whatever. And it was just interesting because it was like, well, Ilan and Rashida are taking on this issue and being clear on it. And AOC wasn't, but they still understood correctly that like, well, probably at some time or another, she's going to be on the don't massacre Gazans side of the equation.
A, she'll get there, and B, they could do a lot better in that district.
Right. We can have exactly.
Have Joe Crowley.
We can have Joe Crowley. He can be a bag. We can just like the new initiative from Israel is because people are feeling very uncomfortable when the water filters on Gaza, and so they're bringing it from a tunnel. So we would like to bomb Gaza for 3 weeks, and then demand an apology for having to bomb them because it was upsetting for us. And Joe Crowley signed the letter. Yes, that's exactly what they could have had in that district. So really, I have to ask you really quick before we go to the postgame. You would say, in your ideal world, Bernie president, Warren vice president.
Yeah.
Got it.
Can she be vice president and Treasury secretary?
I was going to say, why not just put her in charge of Treasury? Why not like Bernie president, Nina Turner vice president?
Well, vice president and in charge of like Treasury.
Okay.
Just make that her thing.
I love it.
And Bernie just does rallies and organizer in chief.
And frees and fucking breaks Lula out of jail.
Invade Brazil.
Invades Brazil to free Lula. He stands on a tank.
Send the SEALs in there.
Yeah.
Bernie with SEALs?
That would be amazing. I would love that. Oh, Jeff Bezos would never sleep at night.
SEALs would be like, we're doing what?
Yeah. Wait, sir.
All right.
Yeah, I guess we're breaking out a leftist icon, and then we're going to go rob
We're going to
Jeff
bring
Bezos'
Bolsonaro
house.
back.
Yeah. Bolsonaro's going to get to Guantanamo. He's The book. Plug the book.
We've got people from Jesse Jackson to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the end of Big Money and the Rise of a Movement. And go check out the segment that you did about Jesse Jackson in particular.
Video illicit history of Bill Fletcher Jr., Vic Viana. Thank you. All right, guys. Patreon.com/TMBS. Join up. We're going to do a little
for
bit.
your
tell me.
viewers, go review the book wherever you see it.
Oh,
that
go
actually
review
helps.
it.
Just put give it 5 stars and trash it. Doesn't matter what you say about it. Just give it 5 stars.
That's
on all of the 3 Monopoly platforms.
Exactly. Yes, buy your book on your preferred Monopoly platform. We're gonna snag a little bit of time with Ryan in the post game, so we're gonna get going fast so we can have a little bit of time. Thanks everybody. See you this weekend. We're gonna have a conversation with Harvey K. Next weekend, an illicit history of the global labor movement, and then next week, John Idarola and Artesia Balthrop.